Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next speaker, Fredrik Carleson, presenting the topic, Unlocking Agile Efficiency, from days to minutes, the power of multi-skill teams, and continuous deployment.
Greetings, everyone. Today actually will not be Fredrik. I will be Obi-Wan Fredrik. You can see I'm a Jedi. It's a little bit funny because in the first keynote, you talked about the importance of wearing the right clothes. And now I just feel so stupid, because this might not be the best way to give a serious impression. But I do think maybe I should wear this at work, It could be quite interesting, because then I could just walk up to all the product owners. I will tell them, this is the technical depth that you're looking for. You will fix it. You will prioritize it, right? To do some Jedi mind tricks on that part. In a little bit minute, I will tell you the story about Jackson Starstrider. He's a Padawan of me. But first, let's go through some background. So you can see that for the next 5 years or so, the amount of money to be invested in DevOps is going to grow by about 20% per year. And this is driven by a need to have faster cycle times and faster delivery. And why do they want to invest so much money in this? Is it just to be more efficient, to be faster? No, I think it's on the next level. Basically, because if you can be fast and you can get something into production very fast, you can learn all the time, and then you can adapt to become better. So in this session, we will look at some of the elements needed in order to do this. So we will look at the role of culture. That will be part one, shaping how we work. And then we'll look at the power of multi-skilled teams collaborating effectively. And lastly, we'll look at how DevOps principle can help us improve our flow. And it can be a little bit challenging to combine all of these elements into something that works. But when you manage to do it, it's actually quite powerful. So let's dive into part 1 out of 3. And it's about culture. And we all want to be successful, right? And today, Scrum or other Agile frameworks are everywhere. So if everyone runs Scrum, then what's the differentiator for you? What is the element that makes you stick out, that gives you a competitive edge? I think one of these elements is culture. And culture for me is your idea of how the world works. Your idea of how the world works. If you believe that the earth is flat, you will not dare to take action to sail too far out, because you will be afraid of falling off the edge. So what we believe decides how we act. What you believe decides how you act. And here's the main point. Your company's culture will decide how you will run Scrum or any other framework for that matter. So let's start with a big question then. Will culture beat structure? And I kind of believe that changing a company structure, but not this culture, is a little bit like putting wings on a stormtrooper. It might look different, but it's still the same beneath. So when Scrum became popular, we changed the way that we worked. Previously, we used to have a team of only requirement specialists. We could have a team of only testers, a team of only programmers. Then with the Agile revolution, we changed that to have cross-functional teams where we put, testers and programmers and business analysts together into one team. And that definitely made us better. But today, I don't think that's enough. And, despite all the claims on LinkedIn that Agile is dead and people are not very fond of it, at least on my LinkedIn, flow, That's the only thing I see. Most surveys say that still about 80% of all companies use Scrum or some similar framework. And what is it that makes companies successful? It's usually that they have a competitive edge, something that makes you different from anyone else. Now, if everybody runs Scrum, then what's your differentiator? What is it that makes you successful? I don't believe that 80% of the companies that change to use Scrum have had success with Scrum. Changing the idea or changing how you think is very difficult. It's not unlike, the transformation that a butterfly does when it goes from larva to adult. And did you know that when that happens for a butterfly, about 80% of its internals are moved around? That's pretty amazing. And the same might be needed for a company, but the difference is that once you have transformed, you have different capabilities. You have some new skills. You have, for example, wings. And you should remember to use them because you're not a larva anymore. So let's investigate a little bit between the interplay between mechanics and culture. Many have tried to copy Toyota's success. Of course, I will bring up Toyota because everybody does that, but it's such a good company to use. And most companies have tried to copy Toyota's success by copying the mechanics of how Toyota works. For example, copying the way they work, the processes, or building identical factories, or, for example, introducing an andon cord. If you don't know what an andon cord is, listen a little bit carefully now, because we'll come back to this. An andon cord is a rope that you can pull. When you pull this rope, the entire production line stops. And then everybody comes rushing to see why it was stopped. It could be because of a quality measure, or you have an idea of how to improve. The idea is that you should get quick feedback, take action, learn, and continuously improve the system. But if no one pulls the cord, it doesn't matter how well you have copied the mechanics. One of my favorite examples exemplifying Toyota's culture is when a reporter interviewed a manager at Toyota, and he said, "Aren't you afraid now that your competitors have stolen a very important blueprint, that they will be as efficient as you are?" But the manager just looked very calmly, and he said, "I'm not worried at all, because by the time they have figured out how to assemble all of these mechanics and how to use it, we have already improved so much that they will still be behind." That's continuous improvement. So many companies have tried to copy Toyota's success, but very few have succeeded, despite Toyota being very open about their TPS system. So mechanics can be copied. Culture is, however, very challenging to reproduce. And it's the same with Scrum or basically any other framework. Doesn't matter what you use. If you only follow the mechanics, you probably miss the real benefit. So now Scrum has ruled for the last 15 years or so, and many developers today have never worked with anything else. And for me, that is a dangerous situation. For me, Scrum was an eye-opener to a different way of thinking, of working. If I've only done things in the same way all the time, it's hard to think of a different way of doing it. But once you have tried various ways of doing the same thing, you actually get insights into why does it work or why does it not work. So that's essential to finding out and get inspiration. I think there was someone famous who said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So the isolated mechanics of Scrum or any other framework, or any future framework for that matter, is not the key to success. And you can think of, for example, the Scrum retrospective as an end-on cord. If it's not used effectively, it's not very useful. So now, if you believe that a manager would be very mad at you if you pull the end-on cord, you will of course not do it. And if you believe that a framework and its essence is its events or its mechanics, you will not challenge them. And from my experience, very few teams actually challenge the system. And very rarely does the retrospective lead to solve any problems outside of the team. And I think that's a shame, because today most teams are effective. They are very good, they have good experience. And still, most managers focus on making the team better. What they should be focusing on is the things that really make the team not being able to work as good as they could. And those are constraints, that could be dependencies, and things stopping the flow outside the team's control. And it's also a shame that if a team should suggest such a change outside of the team's control, usually the organization or the system resists this. And usually it's the management that resists this, because management has been brought up and taught that efficiency, that is standardization. Efficiency is when everybody works in the same way. Efficiency is optimizing the work process to make sure everything goes in the same way. And keep this thing about standardization a little bit in the back of your head, as we will talk and listen to the story about Team Alpha later on. So we need to understand how company culture affects the way teams or companies can improve. And that will bring us to the concept of shu-ha-ri. Sorry, should have brought some water here. So, have you experienced teams that get stuck, doing the same thing over and over all the time, year out and year in? They get stuck in ceremonies, as I call it, when they do the events, the same thing all over the place. So Alison Cogburn, perfect, thank you, introduced the Agile community to the concept of shu-ha-ri. And this comes from martial arts, Japanese martial arts originally. And it describes a stage on your path to mastery, for example, in Aikido. And this progression, it underscores the importance of moving beyond just following the rules, shu, to understanding the underlying principles, ha, and inventing your own practices, experimenting, ri. And many teams get stuck in the shu process, merely mimicking and following the rules. And I think that's the same as trying to copying Toyota's success. You only follow the mechanics and the rules, but you need to move on to the next stage. Again, as someone famous said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I'm watching a documentary right now. It's called Life on Our Planet. Basically, the life, the basic for survival is that the most adaptive survive. Competition drives adaptability, and the world always changes, meaning the battlefield is constantly changing. And I think, that's exactly the same for any company. They have to adapt to survive. And to be fair, all frameworks and methodologies know about that. Even in ISO, they know this about continuous improvement. You have Denning, he says plan, do, check, act. You have in the US military the OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act. You have in Scrum, inspect and adapt. You have in, Carleson Cogburns, who says collaborate, deliver, reflect, improve. You have DevOps, which is get flow, get quick feedback, and continuously improve. So this is not something new. And if we can improve all the time, we might actually end up with something completely different than what we started with, something different than Scrum, for example. And I think that's fine. I think that's a little bit like the butterfly, moving from larva to adult. So the main point I wish to convey here is actually the danger of not improving. And that applies to Jedi Knights as well. And that's what we will talk about next. So now, with the idea of culture and Shuhari in mind, let me tell you the story about Jackson Starstrider. And we will see how culture creates two very different ways of working with Scrum. Video can be loaded, great. Could it be that I have no internet connection? Yeah, I have no internet connection. So let's see. Good, I can drink some water meanwhile. At last year's conference, the ending talk was about from person. They actually did some deep fake imaging in real time. And I thought that was so interesting. So I actually had to try and experiment a little bit with that. So let's see when the video can start, when we have internet connection again. Maybe you can guess the famous character from Star Wars that is in the video. And let's see if I can move back. On the lonely, empty land of Jakku, a planet covered in endless sand, an old spaceship left to decay, Jackson Starstrider holds his sister on a starry night. They are barely surviving in a place where only rich people have access to technology. Sitting close together, Jackson's sister is struggling to breathe. Her laughter, which used to fill the air, is now quiet because of a serious illness. In the quiet desert, her lively spirit is fading away. Jackson, who is only 12 years old, but looks like he has experienced a lot of sadness, look up at the sky, hoping for a miracle. He desperately wants to save his sister, but he knows it's impossible. His hands, they shake with grief, and his face is pale with sadness. Jackson searches the sky, not for hope, but for an explanation of why he couldn't save his sister with advanced technology that was out of his reach. Jackson makes a silent promise to himself as his sister's life slips away. He will overcome the poverty that keeps his family down. He will learn to use technology like the rich people do. He will master the science that he feels let him down. 10 years later, Jackson's determination has changed his life. The boy who grew up in the desert is now studying engineering in a school filled with advanced machines and smart students. His hard work and sleepless nights have paid off as he graduates from his program. Jackson's hand, they now create and innovate. His promise to himself and his sister is finally coming true. And so, the story of Jackson Starstrider begins, not with excitement or joy, but with the quiet determination of a boy who faced challenges and decided to make his own path. So, Jackson, graduating as a top 5 student, he gets recognized by the Empire, And the Empire offer him a position in a top secret project. It's called Project Stardust. It's a project to end all wars, they say. So Jackson, he hops on board on a shuttle and he travels to the planet of Idu, which is a watery planet with a lot of jungles, very different from the desert planet he grew up on. And arriving at Idu, he is escorted by a stormtrooper to meet with a high-ranking officer, an official overseeing the Stardust project, and he welcomes Jackson.
Welcome, Jackson. You have been chosen for a critical role in ensuring the success of the Empire. Your programming skills are unparalleled.
Thank you, sir. I'm honored to contribute to the Empire's cause.
Your task is crucial. You will be responsible for developing the software that controls the defense of our DS-1 orbital battle station. Efficiency and precision are paramount. This datapad will contain all the schematics and blueprints you need, but you will find reality more impressive. Follow me, and I will show you the battle station in all its glory.
As Jackson sees the destructive potential of the battle station, he has an internal monologue.
This is not what I expected. What have I gotten myself into?
Meanwhile, the Imperial officer continues, outlining the rigorous processes and timelines that must be followed. Jackson nods in apparent agreement, masking his internal turmoil. As the Imperial officers leave the room, leaving Jackson with the schematics, Jackson can't help but feel cold.
So, Jackson, he joins the Empire's IT department, the Team Alpha, led by Scrum Master Walter. And the Scrum Master tells Jackson, we are using a well-oiled machinery of a framework called Scrum. Imagine that, right? You didn't know that it would survive so many years. Now, what I will tell you is, of course, a fictional story of how the Empire uses Scrum. And how they use Scrum is just a logical deduction based on their culture. This is not really how I would recommend, running Scrum as such, So the Scrum Master Walter, he tells, Jackson, everybody in the Empire follows very strict Scrum rules or protocols, and each member is a specialist in his or her own area. Jackson is a programmer, and he's a specialist in that, for example. And they start the first planning meeting, and Walter, he says, welcome everyone. I'm leading this as your Scrum Master. Our goal is to complete all the user stories as outlined by the product owner. And we'll use planning poker for estimations, and one story point will be 1 day's work under ideal conditions. And after estimating and doing all the capacity planning, he says, so now our sprint goal will be to finish all the user stories. That's our sprint goal, right? So Walter then looks at each team member and he says, make sure we have something useful by the end of the sprint. And remember our motto, which is analyze, understand, standardize. Remember what I said about standardization previously? So all the teams in the entire Empire operate in exactly the same way. Now, if you think about Shu Hari again, Shu following the rules, do you think it's easy or hard for this team to move on to the Ha or the Re stage? Now, as Jackson works with his team, he can see how organized but inflexible their approach is, or machinery, I should say. So one person breaks down all the features, the user stories and tasks. These are handed over to a single isolated programmer who works on his or her own task. And when they are done, they hand it over to a tester, and then the tester does all the testing. And when that is done, it's merged into main, and the configuration manager comes into play, and he actually does the continuous merging, and it packages everything, and then it's sent to operations with instructions of how to do the deployment. And Jackson, he wonders, why am I even on a team? Because we all work in isolation on our own small task. Why should we be in a team even? So the process is frustrating for Jackson. He quickly finishes his task, and then is handed over to a tester. And it might take a day or two before the tester have time to actually test his user story. And if there's a problem, it's being sent back to him days later, disrupting his current focus. Remember in one of the talks, it said 23 minutes, right, to get back again, once you have lost your focus. And because of long deployment times, only work done in the first week can actually make it into production. Everything that is finished programming in the second week will have to wait for the next sprint. So Jackson, he feels, the system is holding me back. And he sees the need for a more flexible, collaborative approach. However, in the empire, change is hard to achieve. But Jackson, he can't stop thinking, couldn't we make things better? Another frustration is the team's lack of understanding of the broader mission's value. Because they don't understand what the end result will be, there is a lot of rework. So Jackson, he goes to the product owner and says, couldn't you at least tell us, the big goals so we understand what we're working towards, so we don't have to make all of these mistakes and do the rework again. But the product owner, he looks at Jackson and says, hey, I'm accountable for maximizing the value of this product. And you are responsible for programming. Let's stick to that. We have our roles. So frustration continues to stir within Jackson. He feels like a cog in a big machinery. And Jackson, he thinks he will scream if there is another daily meeting where he will have to answer the same 3 questions, or another retrospective that never leads to any change anyway. So he voices his concerns to the Scrum Master and says, I don't think this is very efficient. Can we work in a better way? And the Scrum Master looks at him and says, you're right, we should be more efficient. So from now on, our sprints will be only 1 week long. That will make us much faster. Actually, it just makes things much worse, because the sprint planning is still 4 hours, half a day out of 5 days. The story points are still 5 days, and because of this rush of time, Jackson now has to really lower his quality of the code in order to be able to finish it by Friday. And every Friday, the tester just panics, because then all the user stories come to him to test in 1 day. So, of course, all the bugs, they skyrocket, but they don't learn about it until 2 weeks later, because it takes more than a week to move it into production. And then it comes back and completely ruins their commitment, because their commitment is to how many user stories they can complete. So management sees this and it says, well, this is not good. So you have 3 months. In 3 months, there is a deadline, and then you need to show something, a demo that shows us, something live. So 3 hectic months later, it's time for the demo. Jackson, he hears the other team members saying that, that because of lack of time, we haven't had time to do unit tests. So this first test will have to be a live test. So they're all invited to the control room to look. So in the heart of the Empire's technology division, Jackson stands in a dimly lit room full of control panels and blinking lights. He watches, heart pounding, as the weapon he unknowingly helped build up is aimed at a distant, sacred Jedi temple, a symbol of peace and hope. As the weapon fires, a brilliant beam of intensive light hits the temple, obliterating it into dust. Jackson's breath is caught within his throat. Memories of Jakku and war-torn landscape and his sister fills him, and he feels a deep, aching guilt. He has helped to create a monster. Despite mastering programming skills, he is still helpless. His folks are disrupted as he hears his Scrum Master say something, and he looks up and the Scrum Master says, "Good work, Jackson. Now it's time for a retrospective." So as Jackson continues to work on this, he struggles between his responsibilities and what he feels is right or wrong. But his exceptional skills, they get noticed, and he's given a task to take all the code, you can see he's holding it in his hands, and take it to the Imperial backup vault on a different planet following backup protocols. But as he is about to embark on the mission, Jackson is beset by doubts, and this is a significant moment for him. It's time for him to choose his path. And in a minute, we'll play an interactive game. And in this game, you will make the choices that it will either take Jackson down the dark path to become a Scrum Sith Lord, or as a Jedi Scrum Knight. So I need, and so I'm just going to see if I can start up and change this. Again, it's so difficult with this one. And I need different glasses, to be honest. It's what's happened when you get old, so you can't see anything. And I suck at multitasking as well. Okay. Anyway, there is a story about this, because when I started to do this interactive adventure, I wanted to do it in Kahoot or with SurveyMonkey, and that just didn't work for me because it didn't have the functionality that I wanted, and also it became very expensive. So I thought to myself, how hard can this be? So I actually downloaded Visual Studio and opened up a C# program project with web forms, and then I started to program it with ChatGPT. And as I was doing this, I was thinking to myself, I need somewhere to publish this solution. It's good. I haven't stress tested this, and it seems to be working quite well. And that brought me back, in memory lane, because in Visual Studio it's quite easy to publish to production. You just click the publish button, it automatically happens. And in the beginning of the 2000s, I was working as a programmer on a e-procurement site, and it was only 2 programmers, and we sat with the procurement officers, and every day we came into office and we asked the procurement officers, what do you want for functionality today? And they told us what they wanted, and we actually built it. So it was a very fast and lightweight process. And at that time, the way you move something into production is that you took the compiled code and you FTP'd it into a physical server that actually was in the middle of our intranet, which had a static public ID exposed to the internet. And that's how things were at that time. But anyway, we just thought it was tedious, so we decided, let's create a script to do this automatically. So we created a script, so I had one-click deploy 20 years ago. Going fast forward to today, things haven't changed very much, to be honest. In Visual Studio, you still click the publish, and I guess behind the scenes, it might do an FTP to a server in Azure. But the thing that really struck me is, how come a process that is so easy to do for 1 or 2 programmer suddenly becomes so complicated and takes such a long time when it becomes more than 5 teams? Anyway, I can see the counter has stopped. It's 138 here. And Jackson, he has landed on the other planet where the code vault is. He has entered the building, and now it is time to play this adventure, and I hope it will work. Now, if you have played Lone Wolf in a book, you will kind of recognize how this works. So I will play some text here, and then you will choose alternative 1 or 2.
Jackson is hurrying through the corridors to back up the code in the vault when his communicator beeps. It's time for the daily Scrum meeting. He knows everyone expects him to be there, but his task is very important. Should he go to the meeting or continue his mission?
So now you make choices, and you can see the green bar and the other bar, just raises. So, yeah. So most of you think you should continue to go to the vault. Okay, that's great. Oh, it's becoming a little bit more even. There is some, between rebels and not so much rebels. I think we just move it on. So Jackson, he actually then decides to skip the daily meeting. And as he moves on and turns off his communicator, his focus on his goal. And as he moves further up in the corridor, suddenly there's a big blast from a wall where he stood just seconds ago. Luckily, he had skipped the daily scrum, so good choice from you. Otherwise, he might have just exploded. And you can see up here you have some stats. And now you can see that actually Jackson is aligned towards the good side now. And you can see he still had 20 hit points for any of you who still, play these kind of games. So the next choice here.
Jackson is lost in the facility as he tries to avoid the worst battle areas. He stumbles upon an old terminal in a deserted section, sounding warning alerts. It's running on legacy code, similar to the outdated tech he grew up with on Jakku. A janitor nearby tells him that the droid who specialized in maintaining that code has retired. The terminal controls the environmental systems for the entire sector, which is about to break down. Fixing it could prevent catastrophic life support failures for staff in the complex.
So which choice have you made? It seems like choice number 2, alternative 2, is the choice which is to focus on the mission by locating his whereabouts and take the fastest route. Let's see what happens. Oh, maybe I clicked too quickly because now it was very even. Oof. Anyway, reasoning that it's not his responsibility, Jackson moves on, and the life system support fails. And that leads to emergency throughout the sector. And as Jackson opens a sliding door, all air is sucked out from him. And Jackson struggles on to the next corridor, closing an airlock, but he is now injured. So Jackson moves a little bit closer to the dark side.
As Jackson moves through the maze of corridors, the rebel attack intensifies. There is battle everywhere. His communicator beeps again. A stress tester finally managed to test Jackson's code and noticed a critical bug. Jackson could quickly fix it, yet protocol dictates that any change has to be merged by the configuration manager, which takes days.
So, should Jackson fix the bug, merge the main and update the code immediately, or should he fix the bug, follow protocol, and wait for the configuration manager to merge the changes? Most of you think he should update the code immediately. That's alternative 1, right? So, Jackson fixes the bug and checks it out by merging it to the main branch, bypassing configuration manager. And this caused a little bit of extra work and frustration for the configuration manager. But the thing is, so what's the lessons learned here? Well, it's hard to say which is the right thing or not the right thing, I think the main lesson is that not having, ability to deploy it into production easily, fast, creates problems no matter what. So therefore the alignment stays more or less the same.
Jackson is on his way to the vault when he hears a team arguing in a meeting room. A newly implemented security protocol has drastically increased the time it takes to log on to systems, and they're working furiously to fix the issue. Jackson fixed the same issue with his team a few sprints ago.
So what should Jackson do? Should he help the team to fix the issue, or should he focus on his own critical mission and move on? Oh, we do have some helpful people here. Or? Let's see. Yeah, I think it stays there that we should help. Yeah. So Jackson decides to help, and together they find a way to deploy the solution. And Jackson helps make him a good team player, but he's worried it will cost him some time on his mission. But luckily, when he approaches the code vault to log in, the newly security routine that he has implemented helps him to quickly get to the vault. So this is a little bit, about working in isolation and not helping each other. Usually we might have component teams, or we're not talking to each other, and therefore we don't see the big picture of how helping others can actually help us. So I can see that, yeah, Jackson is leaning toward the good side. Let's see this one.
Finally, arriving at the vault, Jackson's mission is clear. Upload his code to ensure the Empire's dominance. Yet, as he initiates the sequence, he's haunted by memories of Jakku, the helplessness, the loss, the promise to use technology for good. Now, he holds the power to change the tide, to give the rebels a chance with a few strokes of the keyboard.
So what should Jackson do? Should he upload a code as planned, saying loyal to the Empire and his mission? Or should he put a secret backdoor in the code to help the rebels? Oh, we have evil people in this audience. Well, this is, of course, a choice. As software developers, we have a responsibility for what we do, and it's sometimes hard to choose the right path, even though we, should. So let's move on to the final part here. So, adding the backdoor, Jackson chooses to do what he believes is the right thing, even if it's risky. And the brave choice shows that he's willing to stand up for what's fair, moving to be a Jedi Scrum Master. Great. Good work, everyone. So I think I can skip that, and let's read it. Now, of course, in this interactive story, the idea was my wish to show how culture shapes how we use frameworks as Scrum, for example. And now we will move on to the final part of the story, where actually Jackson will join the rebel side, Team Bravo. And here he has brought all the wisdom that you taught him in this game to Team Bravo to make a difference and make it a little bit change here. So, Jackson is in a hurry because the Death Star, a weapon he unwittingly helped to create, is closing in on the rebel base. It has already destroyed Alderaan, and now it's coming for the rebel base where Jackson is. So Jackson now works on upgrading the software of the X-Wing fighters. He works together with other rebel engineers, and they work hard every day. They work together. They become friends, and he works hard. And every line of code he feels can change, the future of other planets to not have the faith of Alderaan. And each day they meet for about 15 minutes to plan together how they can easier reach the goal. It's an effective meeting that helps them to avoid other meetings as well and stay focused. And Jackson's work is now very different from his time in the Empire. And he likes how Team Bravo works. They don't stick to the job descriptions. Everyone helps with everything. And this makes work go faster. And when work is checked in, automatic builds are automatically triggered. And if something goes wrong, it's notified immediately. And Jackson is amazed by the continuous deployment without any manual intervention. And he watches how code is packaged together with a container and goes to a staging area. Team Bravo's approach here efficiently, slashes time to production from days to minutes compared with Empire. But more importantly, and perhaps the most important thing, Jackson feels he's doing something important. He's working for something important. And their sprint goal is simple. Is to prevent the Empire's Death Star's ion cannon from hitting the X-Wing fighters so they can actually destroy the Death Star. So now the Death Star has come to the rebel base. Will Jackson's software work as intended or not? And I should just give a little bit of a warning here. If you haven't seen the movie, it will be a spoiler. And the second thing, there might be some flashing lights. If you're sensitive to that, you might not want to watch.
As Jackson Starstrider worked tirelessly with Team Bravo, he realized the true power of collaboration and agility. Together, they transformed his coding skills into a force for good. His efforts culminated when he saw his code seamlessly integrate with the Astro droids, making the X-Wing fighters dance through space with unparalleled grace.
Your destiny lies with me, Skywalker. Obi-Wan knew this to be true. There is no escape. Don't make me destroy you. Join me, and I will complete your training. If you only knew the power of the dark side.
As the remnants of the Death Star drifted into the void of space, Jackson knew that he had played a crucial role in shaping the galaxy's destiny. It was a journey that had taken him to the farthest reaches of his soul, and in the end, he had emerged as a hero. Jackson had found his path, purpose, and redemption in a galaxy filled with darkness.
So we have seen how Jackson moved, from a more restrictive process-focused team Alpha, to a more adaptive team Bravo. So let's review a little bit about the differences and also to connect it back to our talk about culture and Shuhari. So I started by asking, if everybody runs Scrum, then what's the differentiator? And we discussed how culture shape our word and our beliefs and how we act. And I told you a story about Jackson Starstrider. And, both are running Scrum in theory, but in very different ways. And some differences, of course, is the culture they operate in. It's also working in silo versus collaborating. It's setting goals versus following a plan. And it's the speed of deployment. And I just want to focus a little bit more on the speed of deployment, because this is a DevOps conference after all. When you attend conferences, it might sound like everyone can deploy to production 100,000 times per minute per day. But if you look at the state of CD, this is actually figures from 2023, but I have looked at the figures of 2024, and they are more or less the same. They're up or minus about 2%, so nothing much have changed between 2023 and 2024. And you can see, about half of all developers now use continuous integration or deployment, and monitoring has gone up a little bit to 40%, making it the top DevOps activity. And then we have at third place, continuous integration for testing code changes. The biggest increase is actually in security testing, and that's 28%. And that kind of means that only one company in three actually does SAST or, some automatic security testing. And I wonder what the rest of the companies do, because that must be an enormous bottleneck doing that manually. Or you might not do it. And the top performers also can put code into production in less than a day. has varied between 13 and 17%. So let's say 14, 15%, and that's the same in both 2023 and 2024. And it's about 20% you can fully automate everything, moving things from code, merge it with a container, and putting it in production and so on. And it might be hard to see, but it's about 10% of the companies can actually do multiple deploys per day, but still about 35% of all the companies investigated do it, less frequently than once per month. And this survey was let's see if I remember it correctly, 26,000 respondents in 166 countries. So it's quite a large survey. Now, let's think about how Team Alpha works here. In Team Alpha, everybody has their own work, and they work in silos. And you first have the BA. He breaks down the requirements to an individual developer who work on their own story, and then they hand it over to a tester, and then the tester tests, and they hand it over to configuration manager, and then on the next day they might merge it and package solution, and then they hand it over to operations with instruction, and then it's finally deployed to production after some time. And the crucial point here is that everything happens in steps, and there's a lot of handovers happening all the time. And it might look efficient, but it's not very efficient because you focus on having resource utilization. Oh, I can see I'm running out of time a lot here. And this is a well-known repeatable process, but it's also very sensitive to disruptions. Because everybody's working 100%, and if something unusual happens or something unexpected, there will be queues and there will be delays. And it's essential to understand that because of these lead times, a 2-point user story, will take 2 days plus 6 days to reach production. A 5-minute bug fix will also take 5 minutes plus 6 days to reach, production. And that means that we will have slow feedback loops, and things will not be able to reach production within a sprint. Now, Team Bravo contains more of team members who are good at both programming and testing, and they might prefer one task over the other, but they all pitch in to help where needed. And they're motivated by a strong goal instead, which is to prevent the X-Wing fighters from the Death Star's ion cannons. So the team, they use continuous integration, they have automated testing, and that approach actually removes 5 of the steps automatically and a lot of handovers, and shortens the production time here. Now, how sharp are we on time? Is it very sharp, or can I go over a few minutes? Maybe? Okay. I think then actually this is supposed to be another video about how the continuous integration process works. Maybe we'll go through it very quickly. I can skip some other things.
Team Bravo has put much effort into writing unit and integration tests. Code and tests are often written in pairs, and often the pilot is present. One developer prefers coding, and the other writes tests. The critical point is that their work overlaps daily, and they work on it together. A necessity to avoid long handover times. Continuous integration. When anyone commits a change, a build process is automatically triggered in a pipeline. During the build process, a series of automated tests are run, including unit, integration, and security tests. These tests validate the software's functionality, integration, and security. If any test is not passed, the developers are immediately notified. If all the tests pass successfully, the CI pipeline triggers a deployment process where both the source code and the configuration for the container are packaged into an artifact. The artifact is automatically deployed to a staging environment, undergoing further testing and validation. This environment is a copy of the production environment, allowing the team to catch any issues that may arise during deployment. There are no handovers, or need to involve anyone outside the team to put functionality into production. Frequent increment delivery, whether daily or more often, offers several advantages. These enable continuous feedback from stakeholders, early bug detection, adaptability for learning and experimentation, enhanced collaboration among developers, risk mitigation through smaller increments, and prompt addressing of any issues. A pipeline is like an automated and-on call.
So basically what Team Bravo have done, they looked at this process, they looked at the work, what are the constraints, what is it that increases cycle time, and they remove the steps and they come up with a much more simple process. It still takes about 4 days to do any programming because they all work together and it might take a little bit longer, but I actually get good unit and integration tests at the same time. And as the pilot sits with them, they can test requirements in real time to see that they're building the right thing as well. So that increases quality. And that also means that because of this, what they can do is that a 2-day story will take 2 days plus 1 night in staging area to get into production. A 5-minute bug fix takes 5 minutes to do, and then you wait overnight and it's out in production. Compare that to a 5-minute bug fix, which takes 6 days otherwise to fix. And that means that stories complete even late in a sprint will make it into production. So what has happened here? Well, you can see that Team Alpha, which is influenced by their control approach, shaped Scrum to fit a predictable world. So Scrum becomes a planning tool for them. So experimentation and learning is minimal. So leaving the shoe stage is very hard for Team Alpha, because any change to how they work must come top down from management, deciding that they could change the way they work. Now, Team Bravo has a different culture instead. They don't really follow a plan, they have a motivating goal and they find a way how to reach the goal. And they learn through continuous experimentation, they have a bigger zone of control and can decide how they work, which means that they can reach the shoe, how, or restage themselves instead. So what actually decides how they work is the culture and the situation. Again, Toyota's success was, from having scarce resources after the Second World War, so that we're forced to be more lean than their competitors. It's a little bit the same with the Empire and the Rebel team, who doesn't have the same resources. Now, you might think that just having pipelines is the solution. It's not, because if the Empire would use pipelines, what would it look like? Probably they would just run it by the end of the sprint anyway, or when the manager tells them to run it. And that's not really how we want pipelines to work, because we want the pipelines to give us immediate feedback so we can learn very fast. And pipelines cost a lot to maintain, and it's hard to maintain. So we should really use them if we want to invest them. I think we actually skipped the thing about the technical debt. I can send you some information about that if anyone is interested. And then we move on to the last slide here. So again, the DevOps market is expected to grow by 20% for the next few years. It's driven by a need for faster cycle times and faster deployments. And we have explored some of the elements needed in order to have this happen. And we've reflected on all of them, and you can see it's in the circle here with the elements. So basically, it's about cultivating the right culture, a culture that helps team to become better all the time, to have new ideas and to work together. And it's inspire with goals. So motivate your teams with goals, not detailed plans, because this encourages innovation and empowers teams. And then craftsmanship. Give the teams whatever they need to have continuous integration and continuous deployment and pipelines in place. And reflect on your impact. Our technology today can change lives, and you have to ask yourself the question, am I doing this for a better life, or am I unwittingly helping building another Death Star? And then lead, of course, with vision and purpose. Effective leaders can change the system to help the teams work better, and they can guide the teams towards a common goal. And then, of course, the last one, embrace the journey of Shu Hari, create the conditions for teams to move on to the next stage, which is Shu or Ri. And let's just end this with a quote from Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is, in my experience, there's no such thing as luck. Thank you very much.
Master Fredrik, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I don't know, do we have time for 1 or 2 questions? You are not into hurry. Airplanes are not waiting for you.
Yeah, sorry for rushing it. I tried to time it, but I must have spoken very
It's cool.
slowly.
It's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 questions. I love Star Wars, so nothing to add. It's cool.
Me too.
When can we realize that the team stopped being a Scrum Padawan and reached the rank of Master?
When actually the team improves themselves all the time and figure out different ways of working, you can see that they experiment. They might say, do things in a different way and still, become better. That's a kind of a fluffy answer, I know, but if they do, answer the 3 questions exactly the same day out, year out and year in, if they do the sprint planning exactly in the same way, we're not experimenting, we're not learning a better way, to improve. So if you always do it in the same way, following a checkbox list, then I would say you're probably not into continuous improvement.